Hey listeners, welcome to episode 75 of Push2Plat. Be you first-time voyager with us or returned journeyman or lady, welcome. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope the gaming is going great. I hope the trophies are smashing it and the achievos are rising. Now, we have a bit of a different episode for you today. The topic for today, we're going to be looking at launch lineups for the consoles, but we're not focusing on the PlayStation 5 or the new Xbox because you know what's coming. Not a lot by the look of it, but you know about all this already. What we're going to do today is actually deep dive way back to, I think we're going to start as far back as the Atari and just sort of have a meandering conversation, if you will. Now, I was very lucky this week to be invited on the LootBros Podcast. Now, the Loot Bros are on all good podcast providers. You can find them everywhere. They're a weekly gaming show. They're not just PlayStation focused. They cover PC, they cover Switch, Xbox, everything. Board games, you name it. They're into it. Even, I'm told, Batman occasionally. But it was my pleasure today to join, my pleasure this week to join two of the hosts, Frosty and TByrd, for this discussion. Now, I will preface it, there isn't a lot of Sony talk, or a lot of new Sony talk in there. So if you're not interested in that sort of earlier and retro stuff and a bit of the history of gaming, then perhaps this second half might be time for you to start playing something and grind this away in the background. Of course, the Platinum Shoutouts will be at the end as well. So why don't we start though with just a little bit of the news this week. Now, unless you're living under a rock, unless you haven't turned your PlayStation on, you've probably realized that the PSN level has changed. In fact, it's quite possible that you've capped in this last few days under the change. So what basically happened was that the cap was extended from level 100 to level 999. Now that is going to really trigger somebody, isn't it? And they'll never be able to get to the 1,000. Well, at least not till the PS6, as Aku mentioned to me the other night. So that's something that he's obviously looking forward to as well as many of you that are approaching that level. But on a serious note, this level is an interesting thing. Sony has never shown that much interest in recent times anyway on the trophy system. And yes, this is a push into the new system, the PS5, but it's a change that has affected everyone, I think, in the community and in various ways. And it's really made me stop and think, I suppose, about the community and its involvement and reaction to some of this artificial bling and statistics. So I sort of wonder now, how do you feel about it? Are you happy? Are you sad about it? Are you pissed off about it? Are you sort of raising your platinum torch now, above the hill, waving it above your head and screaming, I want more? I don't know. I don't know what to make of it all, but I think there's two sides to it, definitely. So why don't we first just break in very quickly to what it is if you have been living under the rock. So basically, what they did is extend, as we said, the cap to 999. Now, this hasn't really changed the base values of the trophies except for the platinum, but we'll get to that in a moment. So now what they've done is they've introduced these three levels, if you like, the bronze, the silver, and the gold. Bronze from 1 to 299, silver from 300 to 599, and gold from 600 to 998. And then, of course, the cap, or the platinum, if you like, at 999. Within each of these three levels are sub-levels as well. So 1 to 99, you get the idea all the way through 3 bronze, 3 silver, and 3 gold. So obviously now, with this sort of inflated system, progression is going to be a lot faster. Now, as I know, many of us are trophy whores, hunters, of course, if you prefer that term. So we see a significant increase over the year of playing, but we have to remember that we're in the minority. In this style of gaming, we're definitely in the minority, whatever you think. There are many people that are stuck on these levels for months, if not, a year or years or whatever else, just by the nature of the way they play, whether they're playing on other systems or whatever else. So they don't see any progression at all, and therefore they probably have almost no attachment to that number. Look, I know that's shocking, isn't it, for people here that, live and breathe the statistics of the PSN number, the all-important PSN number. But now at least this will give them some sort of, recognition, I suppose. Now, yes, I know you're thinking, well, isn't this just the participation award? And you'd be right. It is. It is totally the participation award. But who doesn't like to see a slight increase? A little bit of a forward movement, especially if it's not medically enhanced. Why not? It's not hurting any of us, so why not embrace this number inclination, if you will? So if we follow that line, if these people haven't been that interested, perhaps now they will become interested. Now, even if only a small percentage become more interested, and Sony tracks this sort of a percentage and acknowledges it, and follows through with it, it could see a benefit for all of us down the track. Last week, we talked to Maka all about the Microsoft rewards and Game Pass incentives. We're seeing that going on now with Microsoft as they're rewarding not only their long-term players, but also players playing there in the immediate now, every day, every month across the year. Perhaps if Sony sees more of an uptake and more of an interest, beyond our community, beyond the trophy hunting community, if you like, to the more wider spread community, then perhaps we'll see some of these changes implemented. It's been very interesting having a foot in both camps because many of the Microsoft people I know now, they're almost jealous, I think, that there's been a change. But I don't think they fully understand the other side of the change. Of course, the superficial side, which perhaps many of us see in that it is just a bumping up of this arbitrary number. There hasn't really been any other follow through of sorts. Now, I know you're saying, well, CJ, there is going to be trophy tracking coming, which, is wonderful considering the X has had it for some time. It is going to make the grinding so much easier. Those kill trophies, those number of laps, how much distance you have to drive in that grid car. That's all going to be so much better with tracking. So that is definitely a positive. But let's hold off on that until we have more info and we see it come to bear under the PS5. So, obviously one of the major criticisms about the new level is how quickly you move up at the start. But, it is weighted, of course. As you move towards the top, the progress will slow down. Perhaps the biggest change, therefore, is the platinum value has now been moved to a reported 300 points. I've been reading all over the place that the platinum's now worth double. Well, that's not exactly correct. It was 180 now. 180 plus 120 is 300. So it's not quite 2/3 or something. But look, what is 120 really anyway? It's just 4 silvers. I mean, well, look, if you play Ratalaika and only Ratalaika, that 4 silvers could take you all year. But, for most of us, it's not that big an increase. What has been interesting, and I know we're getting a bit deep in the weeds here, a bit dirty, but if you don't like the leaderboards, if you're not participating in that sort of style of gaming, then you can just chill for a moment here. But for those that are, I've noticed a very interesting little bit of a shift in the top of the boards as well. Well, maybe not the very top, but sort of in that your first 2 pages. And it does seem to be, whatever you think here, it does seem to be rewarding the completionists. Well, at least the platinum completionists slightly. I've noticed a few players that have moved up quite a substantial number of positions because they have around 200 plats more than many other people on the second page. Now, admittedly, they would be completionists. They're not playing as many games as everyone else, perhaps, but they're finishing more games. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Now, I know you're going to go on about rarity and all this sort of garbage, and look, I understand that or whatever, but this is the system we have, and I don't think it's necessarily against completionists. If anything, maybe it favors them. Of course, yes, you have the 5-minute plats and 10-minute plats, but, you're fooling yourself if you don't think that everybody is playing those on those first few pages. And look, anyone can play them as well. They're not like some Japanese VN where you have to, trade your sister into a Ford or join some illegal underground network to get access to them. These games are sort of $4 or $5, and they're approachable to every single person. So it's always an option. I'm not encouraging you, but it's an option if you so wish. So I think that increase is positive. The other side of things I've seen is that the 100% game is not relevant anymore. Why play the 100% game? And I suppose this is the thing that I've had a lot of interest with in the last few days. I've sort of wondered if perhaps I'm more of a trophy hunter or I'm now more of a gamer that really enjoys the trophies on the side, a trophy enthusiast. Because when I see these comments in the community, I realize that there are people, and more power to them, that are playing solely for trophy points. The game, it doesn't really matter. And I know we've made jokes about that before or whatever, but it's sort of been clarified to me in the last few days, definitely from what I've read from people, that is the primary reason to play. Now, I have no judgment here at all. I think that's wonderful. You can play however you want, play whatever you want, of course, and they are embracing that. But I think it's the first time I've seen where the game really isn't important at all. It's about the points, and it's very reflective in this argument about 100% lists not being valid. Of course, if you enjoy all games, you're going to enjoy games with or without a plat. You're not going to pick things solely on that reason. Although, again, if you do, more power to you. That's your choice, Perhaps it's not worth the money if it doesn't have a plat. I mean, that is a personal decision. But having said that, on the PlayStation, there are some wonderful games that I've played in the last few years that are only 100% lists. Brothers, Fragments of Him. There is tons and tons of them. I'm sure there's many that you have played. Of course, on the Xbox, most of those games have 1000G. I'm replaying some of them now on the Xbox because I enjoyed them so much, and I really do like getting rewarded the full 1000, but it's not going to stop me from enjoying the experience because now, maybe the Platinum Trophy is worth 120 more. Of course, that probably doesn't surprise you because I have so many unfinished plats already anyway, but it's an interesting argument that does that even really matter? I mean, whatever you're playing, you're going to get trophies for, you're going to increase your rank. Under this new system, you're going to increase the number even quicker. But of course, the journey to 999 is still going to be as challenging as the journey to level 100. Now, if we break that down, those last few levels, it's actually going to be even more challenging. The general numbers thrown around was that it's around 1,000 platinums to reach level 100 under the old system. That sounds like a massive number, but again, with the number of shorter plats that are available, that can be done in like 2 years. Perhaps, some crazy person even less sort of a time limit. And then you've got all your 100% and your incompleted games. So that would probably be a high number to me. It now seems to cap at 999 that the points requirements have gone up a little bit, So we're looking at around 1,200 plats. So for some people, as I said, these numbers are, ridiculously unattainable. But the reality is if you have 700 or 600 plats, you're going to have 1,200 one day. I mean, no normal sane person has 600 plats, do they? So you're definitely on that track. And look, if you have 200, you're probably going to be there as well. It's just the natural progression. So for those people, I think it's wonderful that they can continue their gaming and continue working forward. It has been funny to see some of the people that were at level 100 or even above before under the trophy ranking site systems are now, having a second attempt at the cap, if you like, which again, I think is wonderful. Obviously, on the flip side, to the top loosely 100 players in the world at the moment that are level 999 already, there brings, nothing, I suppose, to this. But it's not a negative. There was no cap, or no rising before. So this is the same thing. And of course, if you want more of that, you can get that via your trophy tracking sites. So I suppose overall, I see it as a sort of a positive. It doesn't affect me, but I don't know if it affects you or not. But perhaps one of the greatest things that has come out of all this is this word trophy inflation. I just love that. I thought the Ratalaika was probably the trophy inflation index, for the last few years. But, now there's this word as well floating around the community. So if nothing else, I'm sure that is a win. Now, before we move on here today, listeners, now I know this is an audio show, so it doesn't interest you in the slightest, but it's wonderful to see in the Discord that we now have about 6 Kermits in a row sipping tea. That's something to be achieved. In fact, hopefully, if all goes well, because this isn't going to come out till later this week, the Kermits will just continue. Perhaps no bastard will ever write anything else again in the Discord, just Kermit pictures. And look, if I was clever enough, I would actually make the Kermit turn right. But, I can't do that. So we'll just continue. We'll continue on with the left. But look, we're getting distracted. So why don't we shuffle across to some games that I've played this week? Now, there's a bit of quality here. I'm gonna admit it. I even shocked myself here. I have finished the Mafia Definitive Edition. This is the full remake, the Hangar 13, wonderful Hangar 13 game. So I don't have any real experience with this series other than I've played Mafia 3 I've started it probably 4 or 5 times and, put varying amounts of time in, sometimes like up to 6 or 7 hours, I think, on the latest attempt, and it's just never really sucked me in. I think so. Deciding to play this game, I heard that it was very good or whatever else, and I know that the number 2, which was just a remaster, got a recent remaster, got a bit of negative, probably rightly so. I don't know, a bit of a negative reaction. But I thought, this is supposed to be quite good or whatever. We'll give it a go. Now, if you've played it, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, the original. But if you haven't played it, it's a wonderful narrative experience. I was expecting more like 3, more of an open world, a lot of driving around and all this sort of stuff. It's much more linear if you want it to be. So yes, you can go off and explore, and I understand, at the end of the story, there's more freedom for exploration in the city, but primarily it's a linear story, narrative-driven experience, and it's a wonderful, wonderful story, obviously about the mob. It draws you in. The voice acting is spectacular. The use of these interludes or intermezzos, if you like, which is a wonderful term, appropriated here in the story, it just furthers it. It furthers this idea that you are playing a movie, which, I don't know, it really appeals to me. I think it's a good balance, though, with the gameplay, because, if you are a cutscene skipper, and I think you would lose a lot of value in this game if you were, then there's plenty of shooting still. There's plenty of driving, there's plenty of other things that you can do, and there's plenty of variety in the missions. So on a technical standpoint, this remake, if you like, it really holds up. I think it's a beautiful looking game. I didn't have any glitches or any problems my whole way through it. As I said, the voice acting is wonderful. The music is wonderful. Just that traditional jazz that runs throughout, through the radio stations. It's very immersive. A very immersive experience. You're probably looking at around 12-ish sort of hours for the story, I'd say, but you will get sucked in. I think the sort of narrative shape, if you like, is wonderful. The early on chapters, they're quite short, but they really do elongate towards the end. Perhaps I would have liked a little bit of a bigger ending, I think. But, overall, I think this is a quality game. And depending on how you bought, or if you have bought, number 2 or 3 or whatever, it might dictate, whether you're prepared to pay the quite substantial amount, I suppose, this is as a standalone game. But if you haven't jumped into the 3, I know there's some very attractive offers to buy them all in a 3-pack. And I mean, that's a ton of game if you do so wish. The trophies all seem fairly easy, except for the classic difficulty, which, look, I haven't tried because I just continually read threads about how this mission is impossible, then this mission is impossible, and this. I'm sure it's not, but it's not an attraction for a low-skilled gamer reading things like that. So, as I said, I wanted a bit more from the ending. So when it finished, I jumped over to Mafia 2, which I understand is a remake of the PS3 title here. And, it's not obviously not going to look as good. It's going to have some rough edges. And I am playing this on the PS4. And yeah, it does. But it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be by any stretch. It's some time since I've played a PS3 remaster, I suppose. So, there's the vividness that we always expect in the outlines of the characters, the outlines of the objects, and then, of course, the dullness or the lack of features as you get close with the facial features or the textures on the walls and this style of animation. But, that's to be expected. The voice acting is very solid again here. The music is wonderful. I'm only early on into this, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. And it's already starting off in that same narrative drive, which I like. And I think perhaps it is why I bounced off the third one, because I just didn't find that drive to be as consistent. I think the bloating was there. I mean, it's almost Assassin's Creed-esque by this stage, a curse of the modern game, I suppose, that there's just so much to do between story beats that the whole, overall thing gets lost. And, again, I know that's my own fault for playing so many different games, but it's still a big commitment from story beat to story beat. So I look forward to diving into that further. The next game I'm going to talk about is probably the hardest game I've ever had to talk about, because it's not really a game. I mean, yes, it's on the store. Yes, it's a game, but it's so much more than a game. And it's also, I'm very conscious, not a game that you can really recommend to anybody. It's a game that if it interests you, you'll search out and you'll find and you'll play. But it's I'm not sure, how to sort of push it or to sell it, I suppose, in that route. It is called, of course, Kentucky Route Zero. It's by Cardboard Computers, and it's published by Annapurna Interactive. So if you follow publishers, you'll know that Annapurna Interactive, they're usually, anything they touch is like wildfire. It's fantastic. It's worth looking at. This is no exception. It is, again, a highly narrative-driven game. It basically plays, no pun intended, like a play, if you like a stage play. There are walls and walls of text in this game. None of it is a voiceover or read to you. So there is a lot of reading. It's also the sort of game that some of the reading feels like it's pointless or meaningless, and that can definitely be the case. There is a lot of filler text here, but a lot of it is for sort of side stories or thoughts or almost explorations of the creator, I suppose, where they've taken a line and they're just pushing down that line to see where it goes. Now, whether it all ties back all the time or not, that would be for you to decide, but I think much of it is not supposed to tie in. It's very much a sort of an existential crisis sort of a game, I suppose, that you have to be prepared to meet it halfway and then go the other half as well, because it's not gonna meet you. Having said that, the premise of the game is that you're a delivery man, if you like, and you're trying to find this dogwood lane, this mythical dogwood lane, if you like. It's set in Kentucky, obviously, a lot of mining there, and it's set in these underground mining tunnels, if you like, this ideological fantasy that all these tunnels are somehow joined together, so you can basically, crisscross across the area, the whole state underground, and they call this plane the Zero, but it's a lot more complex than that because it has this metaphysical element, if you like, almost a spiritual element as well, a blending of time and space under the ground. And perhaps, that says a lot because under the ground there is no light. Perhaps, time is reflected differently. I mean, we'd have to ask the mole people, with their Vitas down there in the Vita Glow, what they think about time moving. I mean, the fact they're still holding the Vita and not the Switch probably speaks volumes, but that's the premise of the game. Now, as I said, it does play like a play, and there is, overall it's a point-and-click game. There is moving around, but there are also some wonderful just performances in this game. Through each of the 5 acts, there are actually performances, and I don't lie here, like music performances, if you like, that you can stop and listen to. Some that you're forced into stopping and listening to. There's also these interludes between each chapter, and one of them actually plays out like a 20-minute play where you're just looking, from side to side and around to forward the text. There's a lot of clever innovation in this game in the way that it uses text. If you're used to, or you experienced the 80s, and these wonderful text adventure books, then there's elements of this in this game as well. Also, this turned on its head. Graphically, it's an interesting study. It focuses on minimalism with black and white coloring, but then it also has some wonderful free-drawn and impressionistic sort of colors used as well, a color palette as the game goes on. I think overall the game, it feels like water, if you like, or almost like air, in that it's so hard to grasp onto, but as you're playing it, if you do commit and you do like this style of game, there is so much on offer here. And depending on how deeply you're prepared to take it, the game does say a lot about life, about love, about family, and also about the solitary pursuit that life, if you really think about it, is and can be, in that we enter together and we will leave together. Whether you reach this dogwood lane or not, even though it seems like the primary mundane, materialistic need for your job that you have to do, it doesn't really matter as you see and you go through this scope of life and you meet people in the game that, they're on a different plane, almost a different path, if you like. So, look, the short, to make a long of a short, I suppose, it does have a platinum or whatever else. You're looking at about 12 hours. Now, this is the sort of game, if you are going to play, I'd recommend using the True Achievements walkthrough for this game. It's fantastic. It doesn't spoil it at all, and it will highlight how you get the trophies or achievements. They're the same there. The chapters, they range from an hour to, as you get on, 2 to 3 hours, or the acts. So you may not want to play them again, particularly if you're not liking the game. And some of the achievements are game spanning, so it's definitely worth looking at. Having said that, though, it isn't difficult to get them if you know what you're aiming for. And replaying the chapters, you can do at any stage. There is a trophy for replaying the 4th chapter, or 4th act, which ironically is the longest one in the game. I know you're rolling your eyes. Why would you want to play it again? What a stupid trophy or achievement. But the way that chapter works is that there are always two choices or two divergent paths. And so, if you're going for the first time, you'd probably play the one side. And then when you replay it for that particular trophy, you'd play the second side. Obviously, you can mix them up. It doesn't matter for the trophy. The second playthrough can be substantially shorter. And there is a skip of sort in that you can mash the circle if you're replaying same sections again, or even, turbo, I suppose, if you want. Having said that, this is definitely not a VN that you can skip for the easy trophies. I know I've spent quite some time on this game, but I do think it's a game that, perhaps for the more mature gamer, but I think it's one of those games that you really, if you do like game design, if you do look for depth in your game, if you're happy to play more than just bang bang shoot, there is a lot here. I think this is a game that a lot of people will perhaps imply they've played or played some of, but perhaps very few will finish. It strikes me a lot like Ayn Rand, if you like. Everyone likes to throw around ideas and quotes, but the reality is very few people have committed to the whole journey. And I do think it's a worthwhile journey. Having said that, at the end, it will either strike you hugely in that way, or hugely like you've wasted 12 hours of your life. But I mean, that is ultimately the risk that you have to take with a game like that. There is two stacks, of course, the EU, NA, and it is available on PC and Xbox. So let's lighten the mood a little bit, if you like, with Big Bobby Car, The Big Race. This is by the German developer Independent Arts Software and published by Wide River Games. Now, this company, I had a look into them. They actually did the Baella, the fairy game, recently. Someone made a comment about how it looked a bit Bibi and Tina-ish in its graphical style, and it's very true. So you can see why that is when you look at that. Obviously, if you're not familiar with Big Bobby, he is a child's plaything, if you like, a decent sized car that young children can ride around in. It's actually a pretty decent child's game, if you like. Obviously, we've had things like Race with Ryan, a few other total cash grabs, if you like, in this genre. This has more depth to it, whatever you think, the Bibi and Tina, there was some sort of a game there. There's more of a game in this one. You're looking at about 4 to 5 hours or so. There's 40 missions in here. Everything is voice acted in German, but you can also choose English. There's an English track as well. There, and it's decent voice acting as well. Now, yeah, sure, the story is sort of childish. The controls are easy to manage. There's a drift, but you don't really need it. Every race can be won easily. There's balloon collection races. There's tags. It's boosting. There's nothing crazy or whatever else. There's also collectibles. The only downside to the collectibles are that they're not marked on the map or whatever else, and I don't know, it's just a fun, good time. The price may be a bit of a turn-off or whatever, but as I said we put up a little bit of a platinum guide, if you like, or a walkthrough, if you even need it, on the YouTube Push2Plat. That'll explain everything else you need to know. But if it comes on sale or whatever else, it's a fun time, or get it physically and flip it after you've got the plat, if you so desire. The only other things I can drop on you here, just a little bit of spam this week. The Birthday of Midnight, the Radalaika game offering. Obviously, you played the 36 fragments of Midnight. It's the same character. It's cute. It's probably a little bit easier than the others or whatever. There's 50 levels, maybe 50 minutes or so. Maybe less if you're lucky, maybe a little worse. It's just about shooting the angles or whatever else. It's a fun, good time. Donut Break, which is basically a reskinning of the Sushi head-to-head game. Yes, a little bit easier than the Sushi Break game. A little bit quicker just because of the star requirements. But look, it's a Sushi Breaker, Brick Breaker, and now a Donut Breaker. And I believe, as of time of recording, there's now a Halloween Breaker as well. So this dev is obviously onto something. The Platinum with the Brick Breaker, same game, just reskin it. But look, why not? It's fun. It's not too difficult or anything else. I look forward in the next few weeks to showing a little bit more love on Wastelanders 3, which I'm diving into, and Forza Horizon, plus a couple of other things. But I think what we'll do is we'll leave the game talk there for today. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive in, as I said, to this sort of console launch lineups throughout time. It is, as I said, it's just a very relaxed conversation. It's maybe a little time to chill out, if you like, here. A little bit of gaming, history, if you so wish. This is definitely not my area of expertise, so we very rarely touch this on Push to Plat. So hopefully there's some value here. And as I said, at the end, I'll be back with the Platinum Shoutouts for this week.
She ain't mine, but she looks fine. Gonna take some time, gonna make her mine, gonna make her mine. I'm the man, I got the plan. When it hits the fan, do all I can, do all I can.
So this week's official topic, we are talking about launch titles for game consoles. Now, not just recent history. Now, we're going to go through just historically through all the video game consoles, not every single one, because there's a lot of trashy game consoles out there. I'm looking at you, Virtual Boy.
And PS4.
ColecoVision. Television. Go suck a nut. So yeah, this has been a topic that's been brought up a lot about games that launch, launch days for consoles. And something I noticed in the past, and Nintendo was always good about this, really still is. I feel like Nintendo, if you look back, like consistently, Nintendo's always had the best launch games. Just my opinion. But it's interesting to see people, when we debate about what console to get at launch based on launch titles. I always think back, even back when PS4 came out, I remember coercing my wife into letting me buy a PS4 by selling all of our Xbox 360 stuff and pre-ordering it, going day one, picking it up at GameStop back when that was the thing. At midnight. I think they still do midnight releases, but it's like 9 o'clock now because no one wants to hang out till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, I guess.
And you got to install like 150 gigs of data.
Mm-hmm. That's another conversation in itself. How many people are moving towards digital just because they don't want to have to leave their house to go pick up the game. I used to love that. Go with my friends, go pick up the new Call of Duty or something. So I remember shout out to Big Mike, me and Big Mike and who else was with us that night? That was a fun night. We went out to GameStop, picked up Modern Warfare 2 and brought it home and played. That was good stuff. Were you there with us?
No, I didn't know y'all then.
Modern Warfare 2?
Yeah, I was still in high school.
Oh, youngin'.
I think we started playing around Black Ops.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
Because we made fun of you for wanting to play dress up all the time.
You got to, man. You got to look cool. Well, then why are we playing this game? I don't understand. So yeah, so the PS4 came out, and we had Resogun and Battlefield 4 that got ported over.
Something like that.
Yeah. So there wasn't like much going for it at launch. Like we knew we had a bunch of games coming out, but there was really nothing to brag about launch wise. I know we had like a new Killzone, which was okay. That Killzone was okay. I couldn't get into it. I feel like it's one of those games, like looking back, it's not as bad as I thought it was, but I don't know, it just bored me.
I got to the final stretch of the game and it's like, yeah, I'm done. Or I think I got stuck on something on like the final part, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not putting forth the effort for this anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, I mean, one of the big launch games for PS4 and Xbox there was the Lego. Was it the Marvel Avengers? It was I think it was this one. Or whatever else, which in itself was a bizarre thing. That, and then, of course, the Assassin's Creed Black Flag was ported across as well. But, I mean, that's what's so interesting about this whole thing is that, in the current climate, nobody has any games or any first-party launch releases, but that's pretty typical, or it's very typical for Sony as well. And, like, they rely on the third party, and they're going to rely on that again this cycle or whatever else, because it takes a few years for first-party. I mean, Nintendo is the exception. They actually have games ready, don't they, when they release,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Like having Breath of the Wild available, was that a launch title?
Yeah.
yes,
Pretty sure.
what?
Yeah. It was. Like having Breath of the Wild available at launch was a huge deal. You know, whether you like the game or not, like that's like it's a marquee Nintendo title that has been around for 30 years, has tons of fans, and it's available at launch on the launch of the console. Pretty impressive. So yeah. With that being said, we're gonna go ahead and jump right into this. Starting with I mean, we can go all the way back in time here. Atari 2600 saw a US launch in September 11th, 1977. Whoa. Illuminati confirmed. I mean, it came in with like Street Racer and Video Olympics, Combat, and a bunch of other trash games. Now, I would see a Japanese launch with more marquee titles like Asteroid, Centipede, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, all like big name arcade games, right? So, that's just an example of like how, in my opinion, the Japanese market had always kind of like ruled as far as launch titles. I mean, even if we look back at like the very first Xbox, like it had a very lackluster launch lineup and really was saved by Halo. Like without Halo, essentially Xbox, there's no telling what Xbox features would have been like. Fairfile. I don't even know what the Fairchild Channel F is, yo.
I don't even think you're saying real words.
Very not. Yeah, and television, ColecoVision. ColecoVision actually saw a Donkey Kong release, which I can imagine being absolute trash compared to the arcade. Third generation. Here we go. This is the good stuff here. Japanese, the Famicom saw Donkey Kong Jr., Popeye. They're actually bad launch games, in my opinion. But especially Popeye, that game could suck it. But the US launch of the Famicom, or would be called the Nintendo Entertainment System, you know, it had games like Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, and Super Mario Bros, which was huge. And you even had Super Mario Bros and Duck Hunt bundled together. What a novel idea. Having two like big name games back in the day. You know, just right off the rip, at launch, available. Wild Gunman was pretty cool. Kung Fu. Duromite was actually the terrible Rob game. The little Nintendo robot. That was bad. Bad.
I love the fact that you know so much about these like old Nintendo games.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing games a long time, and you know, it's a lot of these I've personally played, and then there's a couple that I've just heard about that never had the chance. Like Ice Climbers, ever heard of? Always heard of it, never played it. Like Ice Climbers, I really feel like didn't really get well known until Smash Bros. When people were like, "Who are these characters?" Oh yeah, Ice Climbers, that's a thing. Hogan's Alley, that was another Nintendo Zapper gun. The European launch came out like 2 years later, about the same time, maybe a month later, and it saw Mario Bros. Side by launch day one. That was pretty cool. Moving right along, the Famicom Disk System. Whoa, that's deep roots there, man. I'll skip that one for now.
You can go into it if you want.
Well, I don't know much about the actual disk system.
All right, fair enough. Continue.
Well, I know that yeah. Well, I know that they had released like they changed up the cartridges to where they were actually like little like zip drive looking disc thingies, and there we saw a like the launch of Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan, which is called The Lost Levels in America, and they had actually here's something for you, like gaming historians out there, Super Mario Bros. 2 was too hard for American audiences. Like we had the U.S. HR department or the not HR but the game tester basically from America.
I like the fact that human resources is like, whoa, gosh, whoa. This game is way too hard.
Yeah. Well, no, like we had a guy who would travel to Japan to try out the games for America to see what would market to American audiences. Because, there was a lot of weird games in Japan that, like, we were kind of like, I don't know if that would market well. Now, definitely it would. Because, America's and Japan have had, like, this weird relationship for years now. Like, now everyone's turning into weeaboos, so. But Super Mario Bros. 2, following the launch, or following the first game, which was a huge hit, was just too hard. And so they wouldn't release. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, so we wouldn't see a American release until Super Nintendo when they released All Stars, and you had the Lost Levels, and everyone was like, "What is this?" It was the real Super Mario Bros. 2 because we all know that they took there's a Japanese game called Doki Doki Panic, and they reskinned it to make it Super Mario 2. That's why Super Mario 2 is just vastly different than the first one. Just a little fun tidbit of gaming history that people may or may not know. So we're gonna skip over it. There's a bunch of other stuff. Like there's like 4 different Ataris. If you're not playing Spider Fighter, then get the F out. Sega Mega Drive. A Japanese launch, October 29th, 1988. You had Altered Beast, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade. I don't think I played any of those except Altered Beast.
Yeah, I think that's the only one I've ever played too.
You had the US launch would see Altered Beast again. The Ghouls and
Isn't that
Ghosts.
the one with the Rise from Your Grave?
Yeah, Rise from Your Grave. Power up. Yeah.
Good game. It's a good game.
Yeah, most definitely. Like a CD was awful. And Night Trap.
Oh wow, that's a classic, isn't it?
Yeah, I have that on my Switch. I played like 5 minutes of it. I just haven't had a chance to like go through and actually play it. My goal was to like beat that game to say I beat Night Trap in my life. Like that game was super controversial back in the day.
Yes, yeah.
Violence in video games. And then you look at it and you're like, what is this? A child made this script. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's some super B horror movie stuff.
Yeah. So here's an interesting so now we're getting into the age where Sega knew that like Nintendo was still kicking rump, and Sega knew that the Super Nintendo was coming, and so they were doing all that they could to push innovation and push graphics. And so they were releasing like attachments like the 32X, the CD attachment, and they were coming out with all these like games. Some of them were PC ports. Like they had a Doom port for the Sega 32X, and it was awful looking. Like it played like trash. And then they had a bunch of like, this games that they look like real people, kind of like Night Trap, which was not a good game at all. Like the game's awful. So they were really pushing, Sega had always been good about pushing innovation and all. Like they were one of the first consoles that had to innovate or invent wireless controls. They were one of the first consoles to implement online play. And I guess what I'm getting at is when the Super Nintendo came out, they really kept it simple. It was 16 to 32-bit, and they just worked on the quality of their games. So like, we're going to put out good games that are just going to be memorable. And at the time, who knows if they even knew what they had, when they came out with games like Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, Donkey Kong Country, hell, Super Mario World. Like they didn't look as good as like some of the Atari Jaguar games and stuff. But you know what? They played a hell of a lot better. And that was kind of the point I was trying to make earlier, is when you have, this console has all these amazing graphics, but if the games suck, or if the games are just lacking, then like, you should go with the console that has the better games. You know what I mean? Just my opinion.
Yeah.
Everyone's everyone's entitled to what they want. Everyone likes what they like. That's fine. But that's just like my argument, I guess, when it comes to like the big tech versus quality of the games. It's important. It's important to note that, especially in console. Like if you're going to talk about power and games, just get a PC. Just go out and buy a PC.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about it, because just when we had a break there for a moment, TByrd and I were talking, and neither of us, by the sound of it, were in a similar position. Neither of us played, anything really of substance, or had access even to many of these consoles. And I, over the last 2 years, I continually run into people that have played, like yourself, have played these older games, and I've heard these words of these consoles, but they don't mean anything to me. And so sort of towards the end of last year, I decided to read this Console Wars book. And I know everybody goes, oh, you should read it. I know there's a movie or something or whatever, the book by Blake Harris, and I read it, and it's a really easy read, but because it was the time, in the 80s or whatever, I think it focuses on predominantly, I was probably a little bit too young I was too young to buy a system myself, and we didn't have any. So I didn't know any of this was happening. But you referenced it with Night Trap, but it's an amazing book because he has incredible access to Tom Kalinske, who was the head of Sega America at the time. And I think, now I could be wrong because I don't know the earlier history of consoles thoroughly, but it seems like that point was the first time an American wing of a Japanese gaming company actually stood up to them. Obviously Nintendo, a Japanese company, they never had to deal with Nintendo America. They were just very much in line or whatever else with what the homeland wanted, I suppose. But he really stood up to the Japanese or whatever else. And I mean, they sought him out as well. I mean, he was the head CEO of one of the whoever makes Barbie, Mattel, I think it was at the time, and these other massive companies. So he's a very successful businessman that had nothing to do with games. So he brought a marketing and business strategy to the company, but right. He basically, and I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but it was fascinating for me to see, Japanese culture. I find it fascinating because it's a very staid culture. It's very, honest tradition, honest culture. I mean, Nintendo itself is a company that, I think it was established in 1880, and bizarrely,
it's a toy company.
Yeah, that's right. Well, bizarrely, it was also cigarettes, tobacco, and tobacco cards is where it started as well. So it was all sorts of things like to get where it is. But it predominantly, like most Japanese companies, it's kept within the family, or whatever else. And for Sega to really allow this Kalinske dude, American, of all things too at the time, such free reign. And the book really goes into it because it was a very tough relationship between the two of them. And ultimately, it was that relationship which probably, destroyed Sega to a degree. I mean, they were really, toe to toe with Nintendo for some time there, and it just it got away from them, unfortunately. But it is a fascinating read if you're interested in that, because they look at the Sonic and how they changed Sonic from what the Japanese wanted to what would work in the American market. And I think, for what I understand of the industry, it seems to be the first time where, the Japanese needed to consider the fact that, well, shit, we can't sell, this game or this product like it is. We do need to make allowances and considerations for the wider market. And obviously now today, we see the opposite problem, like if anything, they're catering more for the Western market than they are the Japanese market now. Sony, Nintendo, and, Xbox never had a footing in there anyway. But it's a really interesting situation, I think. And as I said, if you're in any way interested in that and you're like me that doesn't have much basis in it, I'd highly recommend that book, because it's just fascinating to realize, in hindsight, as times passed, just how crazy some of the they were doing was back then. And even that, as you said, the Night Trap stuff that led to, the Senate inquiries, and there was basically a farce, I mean, the Nintendo and Sega almost worked together there to create a ratings board that they self-monitored. Like, a whole lot of bizarre shit was going on behind the scenes, and fascinating though. Yeah. But I think, a lot of people, including myself, didn't realize that, we owe the games, the diversity in games that we have now, to that particular period in time. I think because that's where, the Japanese companies really did have to acknowledge that, the Western perspective was different. And to sell games, we had to, like you were saying, either make them easier or different, or change them to cater for a market as well. Sorry,
Right, exactly.
didn't interrupt.
No, it's fine. I welcome it. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has a chance, then go to YouTube, check out the Gaming Historian. He's got a ton of videos on there, and they're very in depth, very lengthy. He gives like very informative. I got one of my favorite ones was probably like the history of get the history of Super Mario 3, which was a really good one. And then there was another one where it was just talking about Nintendo in general, and it talked about like Miyamoto and his team at R&D 4, Research and Development 4, and just like the stuff they made. Like this team was responsible for Zelda, Mario, like Miyamoto's whole team. I think even maybe even Donkey Kong. I could be wrong. But like they were just coming out with all these like heavy hitting games that are like now have left their mark on the gaming industry in such a huge way. You know what I mean? And it's just incredible to see that. Like one of my favorite stories is like Link's Awakening, for instance, wasn't ever really supposed to be a game. Like they had just done I think the second Link game. This was like Game Boy had came out and it was huge. It was selling like hotcakes. It sold for a long time, even when like the newer Game Boys had come out. Like its lifespan was like it'd make the Vita blush. Yes. But Link's Awakening was an interesting story because like the team at R&D 4 had like they were just messing around and they had an idea for a new Zelda game, but they're like, we want to have a game where Zelda or we want to have a game where Link doesn't have to, he can put items in his hand other than his sword and shield. So if he wanted to carry a sword and a bomb, he could. If he wanted to carry, a bomb and a boomerang, he could. And they brought it to Miyamoto, and Miyamoto was like, I don't know. He's got to have a sword and shield. That's like his staple. And so what they did was they went as a side project. Like while they're developing games, these jokers went and started developing Link's Awakening, and just as for fun. And it's like one of the coolest. Like if you play it, like it's way different than a lot of the earlier Zeldas because you have items that like let you jump. You have a lot of the characters that you meet are like nothing like you'd meet. Like you meet a talking alligator, for God's sake. Like when do you do that in Zelda? And you have this owl that like follows you around and talks to you, which I mean you wouldn't get a character like that again until like Link to the Past. I mean not Link to the Past. Ocarina of Time. But my point is like it was just this completely off the wall Zelda game, and like they pitched it to the higher ups, and they were like, "Yeah, we like this. This is good. This needs to be on Game Boy." And so they took it to Miyamoto. Miyamoto gave it his blessing, and he's like, "Well, I like it." And so he kind of put his creative twist on some of the stuff in the game. And so from there, they were able to develop Link's Awakening, and it's like that stuff like that just blows my mind because it's like it's not about politics. It's not about we could put this out and put microtransactions in it and make a ton of money. It's like we're gonna, we want to make money, but like this it was like a fan service. It's like, hey, you guys like Zelda? Well, here's this like really crazy off the wall Zelda title that you could play anywhere with your Game Boy. And that just amazes me. So yeah, Gaming Historian, go check it out on YouTube. It's good stuff. You can spend a lot of time just watching all his videos.
It's interesting to hear you speak passionately like that because I think having not played these things, I don't, and it's maybe it'll just well, I won't shock people, but I'm sure it's a differing opinion to many people that have been playing games. But because I had no real affinity for Nintendo because I hadn't played any of their properties, and you always hear how Nintendo was so innovative in the industry, and they make such wonderful products that they work properly and there's a high quality control and dating right back in all their games. And I was like, yeah, well, whatever. It meant sort of nothing to me because I didn't have the experience with them. And yeah, I bought a Switch, but the Switch is, I mean, it's anything and everything now. It's a Nintendo thing, but you can play anything on there. So you don't get the Nintendo feel perhaps that you would have with the older systems. And that's not knocking it. If anything, it's a plus for them that they have both. I think it's very exciting. But for me to realize, that, in a lot of ways, I think almost, Sony, well, admittedly, Sony had the chance to work with Sega, didn't they, till they fucked them over, but they fucked each other over, I suppose, potentially. But, and there's obviously all three of those companies had a difficult history or whatever at the time there, or whatever, but it just shows that, they owe that period of time between those sort of three companies, and even Sony were on the back edge of that time. That was when most of the innovation was happening, and where, the games were still being made in-house as well, to when we get to, like the rise of the third party, with EA and things after that becoming so prominent, which I find bizarre, because yes, now you pay for your exclusives, your first parties or whatever, but like, I don't know how you're spending your time, but I play a shit ton of games, and just by sheer attrition of hours, most of them are not going to be on first parties. You're going to be spending more time playing third party because there's just more of them. So the launch lineup, I think, has changed predominantly from that time when it was first parties created by the people that made the hardware, or divisions of it that knew how the hardware really worked, to now, like a core fringe group of studios that are owned by the provider producing, maybe what sells the best, but largely for a more, regular or a hardcore game, it probably in reality makes up a small percentage of their actual game time. I mean, look at what we talked about today. We didn't talk about any, first party games, and I mean, that's just convenient perhaps, but I don't know, like that's what I seem to feel now. It's become less relevant almost, I suppose, from the golden age of gaming. It makes it sound old, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it's older than, I know it might make it sound like it's 100 years old or something, but sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah.
But now we move into speaking of golden age of gaming, I feel like we move into that now with the Super Famicom or the Super Nintendo. The Japanese launch would see Super Mario World Day 1, November 21st, 1990, with F-Zero. F-Zero is an interesting one. I wasn't ever a huge fan, but the music is amazing. They really pushed the limits of the 16-bit graphics chip that was in it at the time. In the game, at least. But then you had Super Mario World, and like that game is, it's left its mark, gaming history, and it's gonna stay there. Like, it's just, you talking like the epitome of 2D platforming. Like, that was it. And then the US launch would, we'd see August 23rd, 1991. We'd get Super Mario World again, F-Zero, Pilot Wings, which hate love relationship with that game. SimCity, and then Gradius 3, which I didn't know was a launch title. That Konami gem. That game was hard. It was so good. That game was cool because you had like different options on how you could build your ship. Like, you could have bombs that would just drop straight down. You could have the ones that would like drop down, shoot out like missiles. Then you had like different ways you can build your lasers. You can have one shooting straight up, one shooting out, and then you can have like one shooting straight and then one shooting back at the plane. That was a cool game. It was hard though.
It amazes me too that SimCity was in the launch lineup. I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Yeah.
I didn't know that either. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're still sitting at like a good solid launch titles. Like Super Mario World alone, if we look back in history, like Mario in general was really pushing the industry at this time. Like he was such a household name. Like, everyone knew who Mario was. Like, they were obsessed with Mario. They had to play the latest Mario game. And the fact that this came bundled with the system just like the other ones, it's perfect. So it really helped drive console sales. And that was at a time where you didn't have to like show off the specs of a console. It was just like, hey, we have Mario. We have this game that you want. So now, gaming's evolved and it's different now. There's just so many different options, variables, and hoops to jump through. But
yeah, that also, sorry to jump in again. You can cut me off if you wish. But the other cool thing I thought I think about that is that I always hear about Mario, and like my first experience with Mario was we're at a friend's house or whatever else, and I got exposed to two things: AFL football, which we won't get into because I know it doesn't interest any American, but a thing that I hated that with a passion for all my early life because it goes on forever. That game. Now I'm a tragic. I love it. We watch it all the time. So it's funny how you change. But Mario as well. I remember we went to this kid's house and he was like quite good at it. I think he must have played it a lot. And I remember just watching it and because not having played or anything, like I was kind of mesmerized by it. I think I had a turn of it at some point, but I didn't want to play because it was at the time. If you hadn't played a console before, it's not a good game to start with. I think there's probably easier choices or something or better things. But I do remember that whole thing was quite amazing. But, that's all that I saw. And then it wasn't until years later that I came across Sonic, which of course was at the same time or whatever else. And, I find it interesting today because, Nintendo has this wholesome family image, which is, is fine. That's what it is. And, it's all tied up in characters like Mario. That's what they were selling. That's what they were pushing. And then and I know I keep coming back to Sega, but, I always like the underdog. I like the nasty a little bit. And Sonic was the ultimate, and I don't know if you have a preference for character, but he was the ultimate difference. He was the arch villain, I suppose. In comparison, they made him hip, they made him cool, or whatever else. They made him angry at adults. That was the whole point of it. They made him fast, like super fast. That was the whole point. It had to be faster than Mario, and all that sort of stuff. And I just like to have those two opposing characters like that. We're probably at a time now where we can't have that anymore because, everything's been done. But it was, I don't think we can just talk about, Mario without talking about the other side as well.
Right. Yeah. And so now this is an interesting time that we enter now in this was called, I guess, the 5th generation. Sega Saturn launched right before the PlayStation. Yeah. The Sega Saturn was at a weird spot because you had Sega still fighting to compete with Nintendo while the PlayStation was on the horizon. And we know that Nintendo and PlayStation had a deal to work out to make a system. Nintendo backed out of the deal, went with Panasonic, made a god-awful console with god-awful games. They had 2 Zelda titles on the console. Both of them were dick. Then Sega Saturn would come out, and it would see games like Virtual Fighter, Daytona USA, which is, I believe, was the arcade port. Had some weird Myst, which was a PC port. Mm-hmm. So that was a weird console. It comes out.
I played Myst. That was a very interesting game. Been playing it about 10 years old.
Yeah, that was a weird game. Now Sega Saturn did have some, they had a really good console port of Street Fighter Alpha 2. I do know that because I know the Super Nintendo port was trash. Like whenever it would go, it'd be like round 1 fight. There was like 20-second pause before you could actually fight. Then like the game just wasn't smooth, and I don't know. That was the only game that that was the only way that I knew the game though at the time when I was a kid. You know what I mean? So it didn't bother me before. But then you play the actual arcade later, and then realize, oh wow, this is not a good port. Mm-hmm. Then the PlayStation would come out in Japan, December 3rd, 1994. Let me know if any of these Japanese titles sound familiar. Mahjong Station Mezen. Mahjong.
Did you just put some kind of curse on there?
I just had a stroke. Mahjong Goku Sky Atsushi.
I understood Goku and sushi.
Tama Crime Crackers. That's just the good old game about white cops. Now you have Ridge Racer. That's a staple there. Okay, so you had the U.S. launch. You had Air Combat Battle Arena Toshiden, which I remember. I remember that game being awesome. I remember it being awesome, but it's not. Let's not get it twisted. In the realm of fighting game, Battle Arena Toshin can suck a butt. Like, that game is not good. But I remember seeing it in this is when you could go on like Sears and they had the video game set up. You could actually play the demos, and that was just mesmerizing to me to see this. Like, wow, it looks so real. It didn't look real. It didn't look real at all. It's amazing how generationally how that changes. Like, every console is like, wow, it looks so real. Like, I don't know, what do we say now? Just, it looks good. Like, there's a lot of pixels.
It's not 8K. I can't play this trash.
Well, the innovations are less now, aren't they? Like, I heard he's a host, Chris, a host of R3 Cents podcast, and he's been gaming his whole life. You know, he's in a same sort of age as us or myself or whatever, and he's he's a master in these retro games and knowledge and stuff like this. And I heard him say recently on their show that it's been a wonderful gaming has been a wonderful journey for him, starting in the 80s or whatever else to sort of modern day, because it has changed so much and he's been able to live through the changes. And as an art form, like, I know I've referenced it as an art form before, and I know people go, oh my god, here we go again, but it's an interesting because it has progressed so quickly, really, in 30 years or something. But I don't think there's very far for it to progress now, or not in its standard form. So the jumps between generations, sure, there's power, loading, whatever else, you can run 8 games at once or something, in states or whatever saves things. But predominantly the games themselves are reaching a pinnacle, in the standard position. And now they look at narrative devices like breaking the fourth wall, but that's not a gaming thing. It's just something they've adapted to these things. But the standard gaming, like, I mean, where does it go from here anyway? Whereas back then you could noticeably see the innovations between the consoles. Now, what can you say? Oh, it's going to run faster. The fan won't sound like it's going to take off and you need to hit it with a baseball bat. No, thank God. Like the overall, like, they're steps forward, but the steps forward are much smaller now than they were back then, I think. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, yeah, the generational jumps are almost non-existent now. Because like right now, all it's going to be is, 4K looks a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that'd be a good segue into like this generation right now with PlayStation 64. Like, everything was about 3D. We gotta make it 3D. Gotta make it 3D. It's gotta look good. And like, let's face it, there was a lot of 3D games coming out, but because it was such a new technology, like, and it hadn't been like tuned, it there was a lot of bad looking 3D games.
Oh yeah.
I will say, like, Nintendo had a good system going. Like, if you look back, still leading the charge. Like, PlayStation, some of PlayStation's best games, in my opinion, weren't their 3D games. Like, I hold a lot of those dear. Like Tenchu was a good one for me. I mean, like, it still looks really rough, but I really like that game a lot. Nightmare Creatures was cool. I was like pre-Dark Souls. What else? Like, all my favorite PlayStation games were like Street Fighter Alpha 3, which was a fantastic arcade port. Symphony of the Night, which was a 2D Metroidvania game. Like, it created the term Metroidvania. They weren't 3D games. Like, but you go to Nintendo 64, you had games like Super Mario 64, which was a launch title. It was a fantastic 3D game. It still holds up well. It's still a great game. So that was a good one. But going back to PlayStation, like, you had launch titles, like you had Ridge Racer again, Zero Divide. I don't even know that. Rayman. That's
Oh, the old classic Rayman.
The old classic. And the NBA Jam Tournament Edition. I mean, that's pretty. I can get behind that. That's pretty solid. If it pushing console sales at that time, I don't know. I think.
Possibly.
I mean, awesome. At that time, maybe. But I know PlayStation did something right. They sold a lot of consoles. And then you had the best game ever made, Street Fighter the movie. That game was awful. Such a bad fighting game. Such a bad game. Like, take everything about Street Fighter that we know and just throw it out the window. They put Van Damme in the game. Also, they had a Kuma in that game. He wasn't even in the movie.
Wait, was it based off the movie or was it the actual movie?
It is Street Fighter the movie, the game. It's the game, but it's based off.
That's whenever they were doing like the they were capturing the actual people and putting it in there.
Yes, and it was awful. So it was like Mortal Kombat style. Like I don't know. I want to say they had a lot of the staple moves from Street Fighter, but they all just looked so awkward and weird. Like it just wasn't good. Then of course Nintendo 64 saw Pilot Wing 64 at launch, which no one played because everyone was playing Mario 64 because this game still to this day one of the best games ever made. Atari Jaguar. You had Cybermorph. That was another thing too. I mean, Atari was trying to push the limits too with like amazing 3D graphics, but at the time, it's like you weren't doing it right. Like we weren't ready for that. A little ahead of their time.
Yeah, I can say I've actually never played an Atari system at all.
Well, I mean, I would say you're missing out, but you're really not. It's an experience, but it's what it is. Now here we go. Sega Dreamcast. Now you're talking about great launch titles. This was, of course, Sega's last hurrah before they would inevitably sell out to just make games for companies, which there was talks about Nintendo doing that in the future. I don't know. It might be a while for that ever happen. I mean, if Nintendo decides just to make games for Xbox or PlayStation, I'd be down for that. You know what I mean? Just make it easier for me just to play Zelda on my PlayStation, sure. But Dreamcast,
what if it's exclusively to Xbox though?
I wouldn't buy an Xbox for that.
Did you hear though the current rumor is that Nintendo will, they may also go the way of Microsoft and make the Switch their last console, but use an Apple model of just iterating on that console from now on, so every year, a couple of years releasing the Switch 2, the Switch 3, the Switch 4, basically. And I'm
fine with that.
Yeah, that's right. Because I mean, their tech is literally the only, complete package in a way, isn't it? I mean, it's handheld plus play on the screen. So yeah, it's an interesting thing if they do go down that line.
It was a very smart business model, and it got a lot of hate when it first got announced. But it's like, there's some things I think they could do a little better. Like the Joy-Cons could be a little sturdier, which I know they've since launch. I believe they've done better about. Like, look, I play my Switch a good bit. My son plays my Switch a good bit, and I haven't had any issues with, the Joy-Cons yet. Knock on wood, but. It remains to be seen. In the future, I would like to see maybe just a bigger version of the Switch. You know what I mean? With like bigger buttons. Maybe a little bit more utility with like the controls. Because one of the big selling points was, you could take the Joy-Con off and play with two people, but then you have this tiny screen, and the Joy-Cons aren't really fun to play with by themselves.
Yeah. I find that very interesting because I mean Microsoft is diversified with the PC obviously, so in the xCloud, so it's very clear that that's where they're heading or whatever else, and it possibly is the last Xbox. Now, if Nintendo were to move in that direction and just double down on the hardware they have, which makes perfect sense, and use this iterative model going forward, it really puts Sony in an interesting position as potentially the only console innovator anymore. If they even want to be in that market, because you continually hear that there's no money in actually selling the console itself. So perhaps wouldn't it be funny if this literally is just by the way it works the last console for every manufacturer, and they do just iterate on that and just every couple of years release the next level of that particular console, but not redefine another one. I think it's fascinating that we could be on the brink of that. It's quite exciting.
Right. So yeah, the Dreamcast launch titles. We got Japan saw a Godzilla Generations, which sorry guys, Godzilla games have never been good. Never, ever been good.
How do they mess that up?
I don't know, man. Just
literally, you're a giant monster. Just have a game where you go destroy stuff and fight other giant monsters.
Yeah. Then you did have a Virtual Fighter that came out in Japan, which I don't know if that came to America. Now, this is quite the lineup. In my opinion, just solely based off of launch titles alone, probably one of the better lists we'll look at. Now, the PS2 had a pretty good lineup too. But we'll get into that later. So yeah, Dreamcast saw Arrow Wings, which is pretty cool. Blue Stinger, which was a terrible survival horror. Not a good one.
It sounds bad.
Yeah. Expendable. I don't remember that one. House of the Dead 2, classic. Even had a really the light gun that came out with that was really good. You could play with just your control too. Hydro Thunder was pretty dope. Mortal Kombat Gold, which was essentially a Mortal Kombat trilogy, but with like a couple more characters and like upgraded graphics and a bunch of unlockables and stuff. NFL Blitz 2000, which was fantastic arcade football game. Now NFL 2K, I had that. That was actually a pretty. Looking back, I thought it was like so realistic, but the graphics were pretty terrible. But Power Stone, God, there's 2 Power Stones on the Dreamcast. They were fantastic. I wish they'd bring it back. So it was like a kind of a top-down 3D arena-based fighter where you could literally pick up like chairs and benches and pots and stuff and throw them at your enemy, and you're smacking the crap out of each other, and you build up this meter, and then you can turn into like your super form, and each player had like their own special ability and stuff. That game was dope. That was an awesome fighter, and a lot of fighting game fans desperately want a new one. I would love to see a new Power Stone. Ready to Rumble Boxing was awesome. Kind of like a arcadey, silly boxing fighting game. Think Punch Out, but just same but different. Sonic Adventure, of course, was actually a really solid 3D Sonic. I mean, I know we have a lot of dumb 3D Sonic games now, but that was where it started, and it was good. Well, no, that's not technically where 3D Sonic started, but that's where it came out and was actually worth playing. Soul Calibur, of course, the OG, so good, such a good arcade port too. And that was the thing. We're kind of getting in the realm of where they can port arcade games to these consoles, and they're good. Like House of the Dead 2, like the fact they had House of the Dead 2 on a console and it looked that good, played that good, was amazing. But then you had a bunch of fight. Like Sega Dreamcast had a ton of fighters. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was on there. 1 and 2 was on there actually. Played a ton of that. That was good. Then there was a Dreamcast release of Alpha 3, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's a pretty solid lineup. And then the European launch would come out. Oh wow, it only come out about a month later. And it would see all those that we mentioned, plus Dynamite Cop, which I vaguely remember that one. But yeah, Sega Dreamcast had an awesome lineup. PS2 lineup was good too. You had Armored Core 2. Oh god, that game was awesome. I played so much Armored Core 2. I heard from Software was supposed to be developing a new Armored Core. Whatever happened to that? Dude.
They're still developing.
Like, oh man. Can't wait. I hope it's good. Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore. Yes. Game was awesome. Dynasty Warriors 2. What? Of course, you had Madden 2001 was actually pretty good. Played that a lot. Then you had Ready to Rumble Boxing 2. New Ridge Racer, Street Fighter EX3, which the EX series was weird. That was the Street Fighter take on 3D fighters. They're solid. The thing about those is they had like just completely different characters. Like they had a couple of the staple characters, and then they just threw in a bunch of random characters. Taken Tag Tournament, yeah, Unreal Tournament. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I was telling CJ earlier. Realistically, the only console I actually got to experience with like launch titles was the Xbox One and PS4. Like, granted, all these games, I played the majority of these consoles, but never at launch.
Yeah,
and it was never any of the launch games.
No, GameCube was a weird one because you didn't really have a lot of good launch. I mean, you had Crazy Taxi at launch. That was
you know what? I totally lied. That was actually my first console. I think I got brand new.
The GameCube.
Oh, okay.
And I got some. I think I got some Yu-Gi-Oh card game on there.
Nice. So we had Luigi's Mansion, which was that game was great, man. European launch with the Bloody Roar. That's another fighting game I want another one of. Couple sports games. The GameCube, and see, we're kind of getting in that realm now where the launch titles, you might have one or two good ones, and then you'd have a bunch of dump ones that were fun, but like not really console sellers. You know what I mean? Like, then again, I mean, you had Madden NFL, which that could kind of push consoles, especially back in this period of time. You know, be wrong there. It'd be interesting to see the sales that time. But yeah, not like back in the day we had a couple like really good marquee titles that would come on, like Sega Dreamcast. That lineup was just fantastic.
Here's a question for you. Now that we're getting closer to current day, and that comment that you just made there about, you know, there's less major launch titles or whatever else. Do you think, and I think it's a fair question because all three of us play on anything, you know, across all different sort of systems, so we're not tied to any one thing or whatever. Do you think that they even need games now specifically to sell a console at launch? Do you think you're just buying because you know the future of what's coming? Like, it doesn't really matter anymore if day one this massive game is there or not.
I mean, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know anymore. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, Mario, for the longest time, Mario was driving the sales of games, you know. Now it's, what is it? You know what I mean? At one point at Xbox, it was Halo, but Halo hasn't really been around. Like, the last couple of games has left a sour taste in fans' mouth. I guess same with Gears, even though I hear the latest one's pretty good.
Yeah, it's something to consider because I think Nintendo, when they released the Switch, they really did need that Zelda game. They needed something to, you know, to really claw back the market share or whatever else. So they couldn't release, you know, and just hope. Whereas I think now, I don't think it really matters. Like, you know, the games are coming or whatever else. And I wonder if that's the shift that we're so ingrained now to playing one system or the other, or even just we're ingrained into the idea that every, you know, 7 years or whatever the number is, magic number is, the next console comes and now I buy it, you know. And I just wonder if perhaps it doesn't even matter what ships now with it. I mean, well, nothing is shipping with it. This, you know, is it day one now? It's just the console. But I mean, you could even get bundles, at least in the PS3 when it came, you know, and PS4. But now I think that even that's gone. You know, it's just whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, you know. And that was my kind of like my argument with the PS4 is like, we know these games are coming, you know, just wait for them, you know. And that's the thing, like when the PS5 was announced, everyone's looking at the launch titles, like judging the console off the launch titles. I'm like, you can't do that, because if we did that historically, consoles would never sell because, you know, it's like, just have a little patience. Like, you've waited this long for it, you know, don't buy it day one. Like if you don't want to buy it day one, don't wait. You know,
Yeah.
we kind of live in an age now like people feel pressured to buy things. Like, you know, I used to listen to a lot of like PS I Love You back when Colin Moriarty was on the show, and that's something that he drilled in the listeners' ears was like, just wait.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy it day one. Just wait. Wait for reviews. Wait for your finances to be in check. You know, wait for you know, just wait. Just have patience. You know, people just don't have patience anymore, and I feel like people, you know, because PS4 has been so successful, and you know, Xbox had kind of stumbled a little bit this generation. You know, there's been this like Sony owners have had this pride in owning PlayStation, and you know, and it might have ensued a console war. A lot of people, there's some people that I've heard recently that state that there's no console war. I don't believe that. I believe there is, and I really feel like it's all just a good fun. You know, like we don't honestly think that we're better because we own PlayStation, and Xbox owners honestly don't think they're better because they own Xbox.
Yeah, because you're all peasants.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You know, it's a video game console. I mean, come on, let's be real.
Yeah.
And really, I feel like the people that are getting real butthurt about it is the ones who have friends they want to play with who have maybe converted over or decided they want to try a different console, and they don't want them to because they want to have that ecosystem within their friend group.
Yeah.
But you know, it doesn't always work that way. Like I sacrificed a lot of gaming time to play Magic. Like that's not even a video game. But you know, and I missed out on a lot of good games, but you know, that's what I wanted to do, and people are going to make their choice, and you just kind of, you know, you got to let people make their own decisions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's definitely no console war. I mean, when you look at what the actual console war was, they were three companies going at each other hard, really hard. I mean, now the three companies are the same. You know, the boxes are almost identical in many aspects. You know, they're so close that it doesn't really matter. Everything's going to run on both of them, or you know, even the Switch is managing to run a lot of this stuff too. You know, and once they bring the next iteration of it, it will keep up as well. But I think gamers they get trapped into an ecosystem. Not every gamer, but a lot of gamers get trapped into an ecosystem. And you know, you're advocating there that it was your choice to play Magic, and that's what you wanted to do. But I think a lot of gamers miss out on games because they just tie themselves to this company that, at the end of the day, as a company, they don't care. They're like, you know, of course they want you to keep buying their product, but they're a company. They're not your friend. You know, they're not part of your family, and they don't. You know, you can see other people as well. You know, you're not locked in here, and you know, if you are missing out on things because of that's you. That's not the company or the ecosystem. That's you and your choice, as you say. So it does work both ways, I think. You know, some people miss out, unfortunately, because of that. But the other thing I've noticed this time around, too, is that, you know, if you believe people, every man and their dog is either getting an Xbox X or a PlayStation 5. Now, that is logistically fucking impossible because there are not enough of them. But, you know, everywhere you look, I've pre-ordered one. And what's been really interesting for me, because, you know, I didn't, and I said that I didn't, and I have no problem with that. I'm quite excited that I haven't, to be honest, maybe more excited than the people that are getting this thing, I think, now, because it is a sense of like, well, I just don't need to worry. But the number of other people that have now come forward or have sent messages to me and like, yeah, I'm not going to get one, you know, or not straight away, not for some time. And it's almost like, I mean, the fear of FOMO is a real thing, obviously, you know, and yes, you know, in previous generations we've talked about today, the games have pushed you onto the system, but there is nothing pushing you anymore. And, you know, like now whether PlayStation 5 will be able to party chat with PS4, like who knows? Like, I don't know, you know, whether Xbox will be that they will be the social problems that you're going to have to deal with, of course, if your friends move, but, you know, and you don't move or whatever else, but gaming wise, there's no rush at all. And I mean, only a fool would think that Microsoft and PlayStation don't realize that the majority of their market for the next year after release is still going to be this gen systems. That's where the majority of their sales are still going to be. It's going to take people time to move across. So interesting, but
yeah. And I don't know. I just feel like I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions too moving into this generation. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And like you brought up a good one, like how's party chats gonna work? You know what I mean? Like, will we be able to? Is PS4 going to be integrated into some sort of party system with the PS5 for people who don't have? Because if you're still playing PS4 games with your PS5, if you're still playing PS4 games with your PS5, like, you know, are you going to be able to chat with other people? And, you know, I actually want to know what they're going to do with as far as streaming, because, you know, the fact that they implemented streaming with the PS4 was kind of cool, but it was very limited. So I'd like to see more options for streaming PS5. Now, whether or not they'll decide to do it, I don't know. I don't know if like they can go all in on that, just because, you know, there's you know, so many people going out now buying like Elgatos and setting up with OBS Streamlabs and stuff. So, you know,
I mean,
I don't see why they wouldn't do that. I mean, the system should technically be as powerful as a modern, like a high-end modern PC now. So realistically, it shouldn't have any issues being able to play games and stream it to Twitch or whatever.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I'm sure it will, but I think the point is that nobody knows. And I mean, you're talking about a console that releases in like a month's time or so, give or take a few days. And you know, the only thing you really know is how much you've agreed to pay on your pre-order. There's so much that's not known, and you know, we didn't talk about it today, and we won't get into it. But I mean, Sony, you know, recently with this trophy patch they put in, I tell you what, if I was a Sony player, I wouldn't be filled with confidence. That was a slapstick thing that was done surely in the last week as I think they thought as a people pleaser, and it's turned out to, you know, it's been implemented badly. It doesn't work, you know, when they said it would work. It works for some people, you know, it hasn't had the desired effect for the niche group of people that they were aiming for. And I think there's going to be a lot of this stuff that I'm sure they've figured out on their end, but they haven't communicated any of it. You know, and it seems to me, again, not knowing the full thing of the other consoles, but at least you had a much better idea of what you were getting into. Whereas this time, if anything, it has just shown that how willing people are. And yes, maybe because you're in your home and you've got nothing else to do at this time in the world, you know, particularly, but how willing people are to blind faith throw money at these two companies, you know, on both sides is just wonderful. You know, it's wonderfully alarming as well. And
yeah,
you know, none of that's ever talked about. And, you know I come across maybe as bitter or whatever, but it's, you know, from a realist point of view, it's just insane to think that you're not dropping $100 either. It's substantial, you know, it is money that and you know, it's not only the 500 you're dropping, it's the other 400 you're dropping later that afternoon or that week to buy something to play on the bloody thing. So, you know, like you're dropping money on something you don't know really a hell of a lot about. And I think it's interesting that we've got to the point where the fanboyism, you know, for want of a better word, has allowed that to happen. And it must be wonderful sitting in Microsoft and Sony, just knowing that people are just writing bloody blank checks to them, basically. And like, oh shit, we'll deliver something, but you know, we got their money now. It's just insane, like how far we've moved, I think. You know, from them having to sell us consoles to them just providing enough because they don't need to sell it anymore. People will buy it. Right. So that's where we're at.
All launch titles aside, good or bad, could be worse. Could be the Wii U.
So there you go, listeners. It was my pleasure to join TByrd and Frosty to discuss some launch lineups and, well, look, a whole manner of things. I suppose a little bit of gaming history right there. Of course, if you're looking for the Loot Bros, or if you'd like to hear more from them, they are a weekly gaming podcast. They're available on all good podcast providers. They have a Discord and a Facebook group where you can check them out further. So why don't we jump in to the Platinum Shoutouts, the Push2Plat Platinum Shoutouts. Don't forget, you too can get a shout-out if you so desire by either joining the PlayStation 4 free-to-join community or in the Discord in the thread. And we're starting this week with Mr. Tam, number 97, Erica. It's a fun little FMV. Took me 6 playthroughs. I did 3 blind, 2 with a guide for cleanup, and then 1 extra because I clicked the wrong thing at one point in number 5 because I autopiloted. That's kind of a long game. I think each playthrough is like an hour and a half to 2 hours or something, so it's probably slightly frustrating by the time you get to the 5th one. Not sure how much variation is in there, but look, I played it through twice. It was fun. So congratulations, sir, as you approach the big milestone, the number 100 plat. The Alpha Seagull, a completion here on the Xbox, A Plague Tale Innocence 1000G. It's a wonderful game. Also on the Game Pass. What a surprise. Renichi, number 170, Mad Max. Here it comes, the mighty Duster. Congratulations, sir. You avoided the glitch and you deserve the platinum. Number 171, Red Faction Armageddon. Just like the name, that plat sounds terrifying. So congratulations for taking it down. MZ Nitro, number 20, One Word by Paugi. Short and easy for the G, triple, quadruple, 5-tuplet TSC event. Congratulations, and I hope you're enjoying it, MZ. It looks like we're both passengers with this crazy Japanese man doing all the work, and I love it. Gaz Davis 11, Plat 62 and 63, epic word search on PS4 and Vita. Congratulations, sir. Another quality platinum and a quality game from a quality gamer. Boston George, number 187, Batman, The Enemy Within. I thought the Batman story was forced to go a certain direction, but this game pleasantly surprised me with how wrong I was. That's wonderful, sir. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful series, and it's a good legacy, I suppose, that Telltale left us. One of their better efforts, I think. At the Shed, 2014. Number 131, Birthday of Midnight, NA. And number 132 and 133, Stormbreaker, the game. Both EU and NA stacks. Some wonderful high-quality spam, of which we talked the Birthday of Midnight. I understand the Swordbreaker is some sort of a VN as well, and I look forward to trying that Sometimes You game in the near future. And to wrap us out today, listeners, we have Redbeard Rick, number 195, Ether 1. Made easy peasy by following the amazing tech walkthrough by the wonderfully talented Velvet. Congratulations, Rick. It's that one I've never tried, but I hear interesting things about it. So I may look at that. I imagine that is also a G, triple T, quadruple T, quintuple T, SC game of value. So listeners, it's been wonderful to be with you again this week. May you continue to have an awesome time gaming. May the trophies fly every which way, as always, and land on your account. We'll be back next week with a live guest, or guests perhaps. We'll wait and see. Have a great week. I'll catch you soon. Push2Plat podcasts are conceived, written, and edited by CJ Anderson in Adobe Audition. YouTube upload handled by Repurpose.io. Music licensing by Artist.io. Push2Plat would like to thank all our Patreon supporters, with special mention to our Patreon producers Zador VP, Redbeard Rick, Ready to eBeg, and MZ Nitro. Without your support, this show would cease to exist. If you would like to say hi, jump into the Discord in the show notes or on Twitter at Push2Plat. If you're interested in supporting the show, then jump on Patreon, the Push2Plat Patreon, where you can find more information on how to support us and to allow us to continue to bring wonderful guests and topics from around the world.